Thank you for being with us, Harry Potter fans. We are continuing on with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 15, And It All Falls Apart.
Chapter 15, and it all falls apart. Chapter text. Harry looked up at the burrow with something that felt suspiciously like dread. He had not wanted to join the Weasleys for Christmas almost as much as he did want to come. He'd come very close to signing up to stay at Hogwarts. Perhaps he could have assisted Dumbledore with the ongoing and apparently futile search for Sirius. But he had thought of spending Christmas away from Ginny for the first time since he was 17 years old, and how miserable that would be, and decided to accept the invitation. "Give me a hand over here, mate," Ron said. "You know I can't carry a trunk like this." There had been a flurry of cursed mail that had winged its way toward Ron in the months after Gilderoy Lockhart's interview. He'd managed to dodge most of them, had in fact taken to burning any mail sent from unknown senders to the raucous applause of spectators. But he'd been caught unawares this morning, and his hands were covered with blisters. They smelled quite awful, too. "Sorry." Harry grabbed the handle of Ron's trunk and pulled it toward the house. The combined weight of his and Ron's trunks forced him to pause every 5 feet to catch his breath. He and Ron were pretty much alone. The twins had not even brought their trunks home with them, but had stuffed 2 large bags they'd filched from Mr. Filch full of clothes and gifts. Mr. Weasley had carried Ginny's trunk in for her. Harry rubbed his back and was grateful that he hadn't brought Hedwig with him. That cage would just be one more thing to carry. "Let me help," Percy said. He stepped off the back porch, neatly avoiding the Wellington boots. "Hands okay, Ron?" "Yeah," Ron muttered. "Stupid witch. You should have gone to Madame Pomfrey," Percy said pompously. "She could have fixed him up for you." "Didn't want to miss the train," Ron said. "I'm sure Mum has something that'll work for this." "Mum's a bit annoyed with Dad," Percy warned. "I wouldn't risk asking her for anything right now. I told him that he ought not to have flown the car." It was late afternoon. Mr. Weasley had enduring much pleading and cajoling from his children to fly the car home. He had eventually given in, and they were home much earlier than they would have done. Mrs. Weasley had obviously been able to put 2 and 2 together. Indeed, Harry could hear her yelling as soon as he stepped closer to the door. "I can't believe you flew that car. Honestly, what were you thinking? You're supposed to set an example for the children." "Molly, dear," Mr. Weasley said soothingly. "It was perfectly all right. No one saw us. The invisibility booster worked just fine." "That is not the point." Harry followed Ron into the house, but when Ron stopped to ask his mother to cure his hands, Harry decided that it was a good time to leave Ron behind. Once Mrs. Weasley's temper was riled, Ron stumped in the attic room not 10 minutes later. His hands looked just as painful as before. "Mum was quite nasty about it. Said that I ought not to have opened a letter from a stranger." "She's not going to fix them?" Harry asked in disbelief. "She is," Ron said. "She said she'd be up in a few minutes. I reckon she wants to finish yelling at Dad first. I wish she'd done it before I had to go to the loo, though." Harry grimaced. He couldn't even imagine how awful that experience must have been. "She's right, you know. You knew that you shouldn't have opened it." "Thanks," Ron said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I hadn't figured that out yet." "Any time." The ghoul that lived above Ron's room apparently did not like the sound of their voices, for they heard loud banging. Ron had to speak loudly over the noise. "Listen, Harry," he said. "I reckon we should kill Lockhart." "Ron," Harry hissed, sitting up. "Not here. No one's listening," he said. "You worry too much. I think Lockhart's going to screw everything up. I know you don't like the fact that you've been getting hate mail." Ron shook his head. "It's not about that. He's very popular, you know. And once things start to really happen, I reckon he'll make trouble for us." "You really think we should kill him?" Harry asked. "Or at least put him in the permanent spell damage ward," Ron said. "He's a threat to our plans, Harry. I know it. He almost effed everything up last year, almost ruined everything we're trying to do, and I don't like the idea of letting him try again." Harry remembered a time when neither one of them would consider this. He eyed Ron very carefully. Ron was sincere, that was certain. But it was also clear that he did not like the idea, for which Harry was very grateful. He stood up after several minutes of silence. "I'm going to go talk to Ginny," he said. "I'll tell her to meet us up here tonight, after everyone's asleep." and then we'll ask Dumbledore if he can think of a way to do this without, Ron looked relieved. Harry noted the open door ruefully. They were going to have to be a lot less complacent. Just because their plan had, thus far, worked, they still had quite a lot of road to travel, and it was dangerous to discuss it casually. He walked swiftly down the stairs. He heard Mrs. Weasley yell, "Arthur," at the top of her lungs, followed by a resounding thud. She was still at it then. Mr. Weasley ought to ask the twins about how to head off her anger. He grinned. He knocked on Ginny's door and pushed it open, and he caught her in a state of undress that made his mouth go instantly dry. "Cover your eyes, cover your eyes, cover your eyes," he told himself. But his traitorous hands did not obey him. She was wearing everything but a shirt, and he could not take his eyes off her simple white bra. "Harry," Ginny said pleasantly. "Shut the door." He obeyed immediately. "You're getting your Christmas present a little early," she said ruefully. "Your mom and dad." "Mom's too busy fighting," she waved her arm, and Harry gulped. "You need to put on your shirt," he said hoarsely. He found himself suddenly sitting on her bed. "Why would I do that?" she asked. "I've been trying to think of how I'd orchestrate this. And here, Ginny, we can't do this," he said, and then she let her bra slip to the ground, and all thoughts suddenly flew out of Harry's head. He grabbed her pants and pulled her closer so that she stood between his legs. He stroked her arms and then her back, and then he brought one hand around her front, and she gasped. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss on his mouth and whispered in his ear, "You don't get to have all the fun." And for one thrilling second, Ginny's hand was on him, and it was the best feeling in the world. Bang! The door crashed against the opposite wall, and Mrs. Weasley stood there, Mr. Weasley right behind her, and for a horrible moment there was only silence. Ginny screamed and dove for a shirt. "Get away from my daughter." "Ma, no," Ginny yelled. "It isn't." But Mrs. Weasley drew her wand and silenced her daughter. Trembling with rage, she opened her mouth and closed it again, and Harry could see that Mrs. Weasley completely despised him. It was Mr. Weasley that spoke the words that caused a pain so sharp that Harry could hardly breathe. "You need to leave. Get out of the burrow." Harry did not know when he had decided not to go back to Hogwarts, but it must have been sometime during the long walk down the stairs, past the dumbfounded twins and Percy, and down the snowy drive. He only knew that when the night bus appeared and Stan Shunpike asked his destination, he opened his mouth and said Godric's Hollow instead of Hogsmeade. How could he possibly face Dumbledore now? And Snape? His stomach felt hollow, and there was a rushing sound in his ears, and he could still hear Ginny screaming at her parents that it was her fault. She'd made him touch her. The shouting had followed him from the burrow, which had been his most favorite place in the entire world besides Hogwarts, and from which he had just been exiled. Stan was speaking to him, but Harry could not summon the effort to reply. "Which house in Godric's Hollow?" Stan said loudly. By the peeved expression on his face, Harry realized that Stan had asked this several times. "I don't know," Harry said, and it seemed wrong that he had no idea which street his parents had lived on. "The one with the gaping hole in it." Harry gritted his teeth. "You know, where Voldemort murdered my entire family. Think you can find that?" Stan did not say anything else, but left Harry alone with the guilt that had started to fester. "Here we are," he said, when the night bus jerked to a halt and Harry was thrown off his seat. "Thanks," he muttered, and dragged his trunk out with him. Stan and Ern wasted no time in leaving, and within seconds, Harry was alone on the street. He dropped the end of the trunk he carried and stared at the cottage. It filled his vision completely, and he could not help but remember seeing the memories of that night through Voldemort's point of view. Voldemort had stood right here, and had watched Harry's father entertaining his son with puffs of smoke. Harry's mother had come in, had taken Harry to his nursery to put him to bed. It took several moments for Harry to realize that the clicking noise came from grinding his jaws tightly together. A hatred for Voldemort that was as vast and as deep as the sea rose up inside him. His fault. Everything. The emotion sustained him and propelled him past the sign that sprung up and into the cold, empty cottage. "I don't care how cold it is," Harry told himself fiercely. He considered lighting a fire in the hearth, but the last thing he wanted to do was get hauled up in front of the Ministry of Magic for underage magic. Harry scowled at his wand and threw it aside. It rolled under one of the musty, moldy couches that nobody had bothered to clear out. As Harry did not imagine that he could feel any worse, he set out to explore, feeling a sense of increasing disbelief that not only had the wizarding world made a monument out of a house where his mother and father had died, but they had left everything exactly the way it had been. The pram was still by the stairs, there were dishes in the sink, and cans of food in the damn pantry. "I'm surprised they didn't leave your bodies here for me to discover," Harry said. His voice was unnaturally loud. "I wish I had the resurrection stone so I could show you this travesty. The monument to the bloody boy who lived. But oh, I forgot. That particular Deathly Hallow doesn't work anymore. Which means that I get to die." He kicked the pram and sent it crashing into the wall. He stomped up the stairs. As soon as he reached the top, a draft of icy air hit him and rage crashed over him all over again. How could they leave it like this? The door to the nursery, where Voldemort had murdered his mother and had been blasted into half-death, was open. Snow was falling onto piles of broken, rotting furniture. Harry did not know how long he stood there. Long enough that his hair and shoulders were covered in the flakes of snow that was falling steadily, and long enough for Harry's rage to leave him exhausted. He felt dangerously on the verge of tears, and he missed the anger that served as a buffer to the guilt and grief. He crossed the hall and found his parents' bedroom. It was relatively intact, but it smelled musty and old, and he knew that he would not sleep here, could not bear the thought of sleeping in this room. He dragged the old comforter off the bed. He grudgingly admitted that he could use the warmth and brought it downstairs to the small sitting room where he had placed his trunk. He threw himself down on the couch and pulled the comforter over his head. He was staring at the darkness, thoughts awhirl, when he noticed that the dark had lightened by a degree. It was not until he heard Ginny's voice that he sat up straight and threw the cover off. Her Patronus, a silver doe that was the mate to his stag, stood before him. "Harry, I'm so sorry. Mum's screaming at Ron. Don't reply. I love you." The heartbreak he heard in her voice suddenly drained him of all energy, and he fell back onto the couch, sending up another cloud of dust as it disappeared. "Don't feel guilty, Ginny. It was my fault as much as yours." He willed her to hear him, somehow, and, pressing the heels of his hands hard against his eyes to somehow hold the tears in, he fell into a deep and, for once, dreamless sleep. Over the next few days, Harry developed a steady routine of wallowing in misery, shaking with rage, and scavenging through his parents' pantry for things that he could eat. He had not even picked up his wand from where he had dropped it. Not even just that morning when Dumbledore's Phoenix Patronus had found him. "Heard that you left the burrow. No details. Where are you?" it had said before fading away like Ginny's. But the last person that Harry wanted to talk to was Dumbledore. If he talked to Dumbledore, he'd have to talk to Snape, and he could not bear the thought of how humiliating it would be to tell them that he had broken off all ties with the elder Weasleys because he had touched their daughter. A small voice in the back of his head that sounded like Hermione told him that he was being completely irresponsible and irrational. Harry got rather good at ignoring it. Finally, he had to leave the house. He grabbed his invisibility cloak and a small bag of wizard money. Money was money, and most shop owners would be pleased to be paid with real gold. At least that's how he justified it. Hermione did it, Harry told himself. The sky was leaden with clouds, and Harry was certain that it would snow again this evening. He tried to remember whether it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, but he couldn't be sure. He was fairly certain that he had slept through Christmas. He remembered waking up to the sound of drunken carolers, but the happy revelry made him think of the burrow and how much he wanted to be there, so he'd gone back to sleep again. He walked down the quiet street and was glad that no one was out and about. He hadn't washed in what? For days? 5? He couldn't remember. He hoped that Dumbledore would not send him another message. They'd been coming in increasing frequency, and he did not want to deal with muggles being frightened by a talking, misty phoenix. He found a small corner store and randomly grabbed muggle snacks and stuffed them in his robes. He left a few galleons on the shelves. He wandered over to the refrigerators, thinking that he ought to get a few bottles of water. He'd found the well in his parents' backyard, but Harry thought it might not be as clean as he would have hoped. He scanned the beverages, and he was about to grab for some water when something caught his eye. Why not? I haven't got anything better to do. 10 seconds later, he walked out of the store clutching a bottle of whiskey. It wasn't exactly fire whiskey, but Harry knew it would get the job done. In one hand, bags of chips in the other, and had 4 big packets of beef jerky stuffed down his pants. Life, he thought resentfully, does not get much better than this. It had taken him and Hermione ages to find his parents' graves last time, and even though that had been over a decade ago, Harry's feet took him unerringly to the spot. He brushed the snow off the tombstones and wished that he had thought to liberate flowers from the corner store as well. He let his snacks fall to the ground. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, Dad," he said. He opened the bottle of whiskey and took a deep pull from it. It burned down his throat and hit his belly like a stunner. He gasped. "I wish you could tell me why I screw everything up," Harry said. He felt the back of his eyes sting with tears and knew that they weren't there because of the whiskey. He took another drink then. Because he didn't want his parents to think that he didn't know how to share, he poured a little over their grave. I try, and it's never fucking good enough." He forced his jaw to unclench. "Sorry about that, Mom. You probably don't like to hear me swear." Harry thought about the resurrection stone again. "I wish I could really talk to you. Dad, you could probably tell me everything I'm doing wrong, and you'd probably help me fix it." Harry turned around quickly. He thought he had just heard movement among the tombstones. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the cemetery. It appeared empty, but last time, he and Hermione had been spied upon by Voldemort's snake, Nagini. When he was satisfied that no one was there, he swallowed another mouthful of whiskey. He was already feeling pleasantly warm, Harry was pleased to note. "Dad," he said forcefully, "you could also help me with your best mate. You know, Sirius Black? My supposed godfather, who has been out of Azkaban for almost an entire year and hasn't once stopped in for a chat." Thinking of Sirius made the ache in his heart, which he knew would not go away no matter how much liquor he consumed, grow stronger. He glared at the bottle in his hand for a little while and realized that the invisibility cloak had fallen off of him. He pulled it up over himself again, looking around warily. He moved closer and traced the outlines of their names and birth dates. He lingered over the etched date of death, October 31st, 1981, the day that Harry's life had changed forever, when the first part of the prophecy had been enacted and he had been marked for death. "I miss you," he said, and he did not like how his voice sounded so much like a child's. "I'm so sorry, I wish I could have." But he could not choke the words out. How could he tell his parents that he had gone back to save everyone else but them? "The last enemy that shall be defeated is death," Harry said softly. He brushed away the tears that were now falling freely down his face. "I think I understand that a little better now." Harry bent over and picked up the snacks he had left strewn on the ground. "I'll come back," he promised. "Maybe I'll bring Ginny, too. And Ron. Although he might hate me, too, for effing everything up." He wandered back to the cottage, in no particular hurry. Every once in a while, he stopped to take another sip of whiskey. Night had fallen while he had spent time at his parents' graves, and the air had an ominous feeling to it that meant that it would begin to snow at any moment. No sooner had he entered the privacy of the cottage, and he immediately suspected that Dumbledore knew where he was and had been watching him, than the Phoenix Patronus, which was becoming all too familiar a sight, appeared. "Harry Potter, come to Hogwarts at once." Guess he hasn't been watching me, Harry thought. The messages had become increasingly angry and worried. Dumbledore apparently still did not know what had happened, as just 2 days before he said that he had received a disturbing message from the Weasleys. Harry could guess what it was. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley did not want to allow contact between Harry and Ginny. He flopped down on the couch, opened a bag of chips, and popped a handful into his mouth. He washed it down with whiskey. He slowed down the drinking for a while and stared into the empty hearth, his mood becoming steadily darker. He wished he could go back in time to just before Mrs. Weasley had barged through the door and demanded that he get away from her daughter. By the time the snow had stopped and the moon had fully risen, Harry had begun seriously drinking again. It didn't help the gaping wound in his chest. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the rage and hatred on Mrs. Weasley's face, and he could hear the chill in Mr. Weasley's voice echoing in his head. Get out of the burrow. Get out. Get out. Get out. You aren't welcome here. Why hadn't Ginny sent another message to him? Why was it only Dumbledore sending the messages? He knew with absolute certainty that Ginny was not angry with him. Ron, now, was probably furious. But Ginny couldn't be. Where are you, Ginny? He asked when the silence became too much to bear, and he had to hear the sound of someone's voice. Things became a bit fuzzy after that. Harry rose to his feet after hours of sitting, and had to catch himself to keep from falling over. He took another drink and noticed, with some surprise, that the bottle only had about a third left. I need my wand, he thought, despite the fact that he had not picked it up since the first night he was here. He set the bottle very carefully on the floor, knelt down, and reached under the couch. It took him several tries to find it, and several tries to get up again with the bottle in one hand and his wand in the other. He stood uncertainly in the middle of the sitting room. Which way should he go? The front or the back? He decided to go out the front door because it was much closer, and he was fairly certain that his legs would carry him there. He managed, though he had to push himself off the walls at times. The colder air felt good on his flushed body. He pitched forward as he crossed the threshold, and he almost dropped his bottle. "Don't do that, Harry," he said out loud. "That would be stupid." He closed the door, propped himself up against it, and took another swig. He looked up at the stars. Have they always moved like that? And felt another surge of anger. "Hey, stars," he said, "got any effing prophecies for me tonight? I could use another one." He squinted at them, but it made him feel queasy to watch them move around like that. His gaze fell upon the spot where, if he moved close to it, the sign would appear. He stumbled down the path toward it. It rose up, just as he had known it would, and he leaned up against it. He felt a lump in his throat, and took another pull from the bottle to stop the tears. Everything crashed down on him. The look on Mrs. Weasley's face, the things Mr. Weasley had said, the conversation he had overheard, that damn article that Umbridge wrote, the fact that he had lost his surrogate family, and the closest thing he had to parents since he was 1 year old. "I want a sweater," he said, "but I'm never going to get one. Never, never, never." He squinted at the sign and could not help but notice that there were far fewer messages, and all of them were old. People probably don't want to support the future Dark Lord, Harry thought bitterly. His sudden rage choked him. He lifted his wand, fully intending to blast the sign away and damn the consequences, but the shuffle of feet distracted him. "Is that you, Voldemort? You evil son of a bitch!" Harry shouted. The small part of his mind that wasn't completely drunk told him he was acting like a lunatic. Voldemort was still in Albania, and he wouldn't return to England for another 6 months. But that part of him was tiny and became smaller still when he took another drink. "Come out. Try to kill me, you bastard. I hate you." The footsteps paused, and he heard a swift intake of breath. "That's right," Harry continued. He then swore loudly and incoherently for what felt like several hours, but he could not seem to stop himself. "Finish the job," he said finally. Lights were starting to come on in the neighboring houses, but he didn't care if the Muggles heard him. If Voldemort killed him now, the Ministry could deal with obliviating them. "Or are you still a coward?" There was a bang, and his voice cut off abruptly. He was still shouting, but he could not hear sound. Was Voldemort trying to stop him from cursing him? His chest swelled with outrage, and he wanted to kill him, but he couldn't seem to move. He dropped his bottle, and it shattered, spraying his shoes and the hem of his robes with whiskey. He felt himself wavering, and put his hand out to catch himself on the sign, but it wasn't where he put it, and he pitched sideways. Strong arms caught him before he fell over, and suddenly he was ushered forward, stumbling more than walking, away from the cottage and down the street. "My wand," he tried to say, but no words came out. "Keep walking, Harry, it's all right." The voice was low and sounded familiar, but it wasn't Voldemort. Voldemort had a high voice, and he would never, ever help Harry walk anywhere. Maybe it was Mr. Weasley. He might have decided to forgive Harry, but no, Mr. Weasley hated him now. "It's not all right," Harry wanted to say. In what seemed like no time at all, whoever it was that helped Harry stay upright was banging on the door to another cottage. It opened immediately. Heard him shouting. Had to silence him. The Muggles heard him too. Was about to go over there myself, but then I saw you. Harry tried to keep track of what they were saying, but it took too much effort, and he only registered snatches of the conversation. Someone small grabbed his arm, and it was flung over frail shoulders. Wherever he was, it was very dark. Didn't know anyone had the courage to talk about Voldemort like that. I couldn't help but let him go on a bit. Do you think he's mad like some people say? No, Harry said, and was glad to find that his vocal cords were working again. I'm not mad. He's not mad, that familiar voice said. Harry wished he weren't quite so drunk. Maybe he could place it if he were sober. He's drunk. He was guzzling a bottle of whiskey, and it was almost empty, and I suspect he's in quite a lot of pain. He visited Lily's and James' graves today. Harry opened his eyes and realized that the room was brightly lit and spinning quite a lot, and it only seemed dark because he had forgotten that he'd squeezed them shut. He still could not tell who was talking about him. Someone had removed his glasses. Glasses? Harry slurred. Someone put them back on his face. A very old woman was staring at him. She looked a little familiar. Get away from me, Nagini. What the Harry, stop. The man grabbed him, pinning his arms to his side. Harry stared at Bathilda Bagshot, and then realized that she probably didn't have a great snake inside her neck yet. Sorry, Mrs. Bagshot. He turned his head with much effort and came face to face with a man he knew very well indeed. Padfoot, he said in an anguished voice. Where have you been? And then he started to cry, and he did not know whether the tears came from the large amount of liquor he had consumed, or whether he was just so happy to see Sirius Black again, who had arrived just when Harry had needed him most, when he had felt like everyone he cared about the most had turned their backs on him. I needed you, Harry said. Why didn't you find me sooner? I didn't know if you'd want me to find you, Harry, Sirius said. Don't be stupid, he said. You're my godfather. And that was the last thing he remembered before he passed out. Harry dropped Sirius' arm and leaned away to vomit in the street, and not on his godfather. I hate apparition. Operating with a hangover is not fun, is it? Sirius said, too cheerfully. Harry was desperately grateful to have found his godfather again, but he spoke too loud, and he was too damn happy. I'm not hungover, Harry said weakly. Still drunk then? Sirius, Harry said, if you have any mercy at all, you would take me to the nearest place that sells hangover remedies. I'd even try Muggle ones, I swear. Oh no, Sirius said. You got to learn this lesson the hard way. Where'd you learn that one? Voldemort, Harry asked. I'm suffering here. Actually, it was your grandfather, Sirius told him. James and I had to learn this the hard way, and so do you. And judging how livid Dumbledore's Patronus sounded, I thought it best to take you straight to Hogwarts. Harry had awoken that morning by Sirius prodding him and telling him that he needed to wash quickly and that they were going to Hogwarts. The sun had poked him hard in the eyes, and even the sound of rushing water had been far too much for his sensitive ears. When he'd finally emerged from Bathilda Bagshot's small bathroom, Sirius had thrust a cup of tea at him, handed him his wand, bewitched the trunk he had retrieved from Harry's parents' house to make it fit in his pocket, and had taken him to Hogsmeade. Hand me my invisibility cloak, please, Harry said. When Sirius eyed him suspiciously, he evidently thought that Harry was a flight risk. He added, Do you really think that I want McGonagall or the other professors to see me like this? I won't run. You've apparently been hiding from Dumbledore, Sirius pointed out. And judging by the mess you made at your parents' house, you've been successful at it for a while. I'm not the only one who's been hiding from Dumbledore, Harry accused. You've been missing for almost a year. I had no idea that you wanted to see me so badly, Sirius said quietly. I've lived with the fact that I basically killed your mother and father. No, you didn't, Harry said so sharply that his head throbbed. He winced. Pettigrew betrayed my parents. And besides, you'll know soon enough, Harry said darkly. It's me that needs your forgiveness. Trust me. The walk from Hogsmeade to Hogwarts was long and slow and very painful. The entrance hall was pleasantly dark, and Harry sighed with relief. The weak winter sun had been far, far too bright. It was empty and quiet, though not for long, as Harry heard footsteps. He turned and saw the only person he wanted to run into, Remus Lupin. He stopped halfway down the stairs and stared through Harry, as he was invisible, at Sirius. The silence swelled, and Remus made a convulsive movement as if he were about to run. Harry did not understand why Remus dreaded seeing Sirius, but he had to do something. He pulled off the cloak enough to reveal his head. "Don't you dare run away." "Harry!" Remus all but shouted. "Where have you been? The whole castle's been worried. Are you ill? You look very unwell. If you call being half drunk and half hung over ill," Sirius said. Remus narrowed his eyes. "You let a 13-year-old get drunk?" Sirius held up his hands. "Don't blame me. He did it all by himself. I was only there for the end of it, when he was calling Voldemort some very nasty names." Remus looked bewildered. "I'm coming to your office now," Harry said carefully. He had that horrible feeling in the back of his throat, like he was going to be sick again. Remus said. "You know," Harry said, "I need to talk to you. And Sirius." "You're going to see Dumbledore," Sirius said firmly. "We can talk to Remus later." "That's what I meant," Harry said. "Remus, I need to talk to you. It's okay if we do it in Dumbledore's office. It's probably for the best." Remus raised his eyebrows at the familiar address, but Harry didn't care. He pulled the cloak back over his head. "Can one of you levitate me to Dumbledore's office?" "What did I tell you about learning your lesson?" Sirius asked, but he was grinning as he drew his wand. "Just this once, and only because we'll get there faster." Harry suspected that he dozed off a little, because one moment he was reveling in the sensation that he was resting on some giant bed of air, and the next they were halfway to Dumbledore's office. The silence was so thick that he suspected that it would take a rather large severing charm to cut it. Why weren't they embracing each other like brothers? The Marauders, not counting that bastard Wormtail, had once been as close of friends as Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna. "Will you help me make my own Marauders map?" Harry asked suddenly. "You know about the Marauders map?" Remus asked with great surprise. "Did you tell him about it, Sirius?" "No," Sirius said slowly. "He called me Padfoot as soon as he saw me, too." Harry did not want to start this conversation on the stairs, so he ignored their stares, and he didn't say anything. Instead, he groaned. "Dumbledore is going to be very angry with me." "Going to be?" Sirius said. "I think that Professor Dumbledore will be relieved to see that you are safe," Remus said at the same time. "Albus is very angry with Harry," Sirius told him. "He sent a message to Harry this morning that rattled the windows in old Bathilda Bagshot's cottage." "Harry, why didn't you come back to Hogwarts?" Remus asked. "I didn't want to." Apparently Remus could not argue with that, for he said nothing further. And all too soon they were standing in front of the gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's private office. "Lemon drops," Remus said firmly. It sprung away. It took some maneuvering to get Harry down again, and he ended up rapping his hand sharply against the stone wall. "Ouch! Sorry," Sirius said. "You might want to take that cloak off now." Harry did not want to lose the protection that the cloak offered just yet. Dumbledore might have another professor in there. Remus rapped sharply on the door, and at Dumbledore's enter, he pushed it open. Harry sidled in behind him. Sirius slid in behind Harry. It appeared that he also did not want to see Dumbledore. Harry felt a lump in his throat that was not entirely due to the fact that the moving stairs had nearly made him vomit again. "Remus, Sirius?" Dumbledore sounded surprised. "Where in Merlin's name have you been?" Sirius said. "I've been around." Harry remained silent. "I'm not being a coward," he assured himself. "I just don't want Dumbledore to see me like this." "I expect your godson will be quite pleased to see you," Dumbledore said pleasantly. "Although it remains to be seen if he will return to this school. He went missing almost 2 weeks ago." "He did seem pleased to see me, in fact," Sirius said. There was a lot of pain in his voice. If he still believed that Harry should hate him for what Wormtail did, Harry was going to throttle him. Sirius reached over and pulled Harry's invisibility cloak off. There was a stunned silence. Harry looked at the ground. He looked at the portraits. He looked at the hearth. He looked anywhere but at Dumbledore. The room spun, and he closed his eyes. His stomach rolled. "Basin," he said weakly, and he sat down on a chair. "Harry," Sirius said, shoving the bucket he'd conjured between Harry's knees, "learned the danger of drinking large amounts of whiskey last night." There was movement and a whooshing sound, and Dumbledore called into the flute, "Severus, Harry's here." There was a pause, then Sirius Black as well. "Bring one of your hangover potions, please." Severus Snape? Sirius said incredulously. What's he doing here? He is the potion's master, Dumbledore said. And our ally. Sirius, Harry murmured. Snape is a friend. He is, Dumbledore confirmed. Please try not to let him antagonize you too much. We need the both of you. Sirius remained silent. Severus appeared moments later, gripping a small bottle, the likes of which Harry had been longing to see all morning. This is the best I could find, Dumbledore. Harry could feel Snape staring at him, so he studied at the bottom of the bucket very carefully. I would like to know. Sirius reached over and clasped Harry's shoulder. Why my godson felt the need to get blind, stinking drunk last night. Your godson, Snape said smoothly. Harry groaned. You haven't tried to contact Potter all year. Don't tell me that you were expecting me to show up too. Everyone wanted you to show up, Harry said as firmly as he could. Snape, the remedy. I'm begging you. Should I withhold it until we get some answers? Snape asked Dumbledore. I got kicked out of the burrow, Harry said sullenly. We know, Snape said. The burrow? Sirius asked. Two of Harry's best friends live there, Remus murmured. Harry was supposed to spend the Christmas holidays with them, but he left. I was told that I wasn't wanted there anymore, Harry said. After I tell us what happened, and you get to drink this, Snape waved the bottle near his face. Go on, Harry, Sirius said. Harry looked between the two of them, stunned. Do you have any idea how strange it is to hear the two of you agreeing on anything? Don't plan on it happening again, Snape said, and stop stalling. Harry licked his lips. Ginny, she wanted to give me an early, Christmas present. The implications of that were not lost on the other four. Ginny's only 12 years old. Harry, Remus said quietly, but Harry could hear the reproach quite clearly. Harry flushed. That was very dangerous of you to let that happen at the burrow, Dumbledore said. But I expect you already know that. It was very wrong of him to let it happen anywhere, Remus said solidly. She's very, very young. Sex at that age. We didn't, Harry said loudly. We didn't have sex. I swear it was only in her shirt. And she had her hand. Then Mrs. Weasley caught us, and Mr. Weasley told me to get out, and that I was no longer welcome at the burrow. Snape thrust the bottle into his hand. Harry stared at it a moment, opened it, and drained it. His head immediately began to clear. He desperately hated the fact that something that should have been very private, and just between him and Ginny, was being paraded out in front of basically everyone he cared about. I just couldn't help it, Harry said helplessly. You said that you were going to wait until she was 14, Dumbledore said. But if you absolutely couldn't wait, couldn't you have exchanged gifts while you were still here? Why would Harry tell you when he was going to have sex? Sirius asked, confused. Remus sputtered. What is going on here? Are you actually saying that you would permit Harry and Ginny to have sex? Ginny isn't even a teenager, and Harry just barely is. Harry and Ginny are a special case, as I assume you will know momentarily, Dumbledore said. I assume that you want them to know? Yes, Harry said. Dumbledore got up from behind his desk again and opened the cupboard door. He brought out the pensieve and placed it down carefully. He siphoned off the memories that already swirled and put them into several glass bottles. Harry felt a pang of guilt when he realized that Dumbledore had probably been searching his memories, trying to find Harry. I'm sorry, Harry said. I couldn't face coming back here. Where were you, incidentally? Snape asked. He'd been living in James and Lily's house, Sirius said. Remus knit his brows. But doesn't it still have a hole in it where? I didn't care, Harry said. He didn't care about much of anything last night, Sirius informed the rest. When I found him, he was screaming obscenities at me. He thought I was Voldemort. And when I took him to Bathilda Bagshot's, her house was closer than the house I bought. He got a good look at her and screamed something about Nagini and jumped at her. Snape snorted. It was an honest mistake, Harry said defensively. I was drunk and confused. What did Bathilda say? Dumbledore asked. If this got out, she won't say anything, Sirius said. I asked her not to, and she's always been fond of Harry. Harry's stomach clenched. The Weasleys were supposed to be fond of me too, he said through gritted teeth. And look how that's just turned out. He tried to force the bitterness away, but it choked him. Harry, if you did touch their daughter. I love her, Harry shouted. And They didn't even trust me before that. Arthur Weasley didn't want to be tainted by me. He said so last summer. He stood up and placed his wand to his temple. Harry, no. Remus and Sirius shouted at once. I'm not going to do myself in, Harry said. You need to see my memories. Sirius, he turned toward the other man. Before you see this, I'm begging you to forgive me. It was my fault that you spent an extra year and a half in Azkaban. And I know it was terrible. But please. Harry looked away. He did not think he could bear it if Sirius turned his back on him as well. He didn't think he could do this without him. He wasn't even sure that he could do it without the Weasleys. Long streams of memories the color of molten silver flowed from his temple to his wand. When he was satisfied that he had enough to explain what was going on, he swirled it in the pensieve. He'd added a few more memories than he had planned, mainly for Sirius' benefit, to show him how sorry he really was. This is going to take you a while, Harry said, but we'll be right here. I'm sure you'll have questions. Remus and Sirius looked at him for a long time, then stepped forward at the same time and fell into Harry's memories of the future.